After returning from a lengthy business trip, I went for a walk with my son. But what he said during that walk completely shattered me. Cheating is something that cannot easily be forgiven. The term forgive doesn't really fit in this context. Betrayal isn't something you just move past. It's something you either accept or reject. When someone chooses to tolerate betrayal, it doesn't mean they've truly forgiven. It stays with you forever. A person who betrays someone should understand that, once their actions are exposed, they cannot rely on being forgiven. Why don't people, especially women, seem to understand this? A genuine man, one who is not just a jerk, would never accept betrayal. Living with a cheating partner is like smoking someone else's used cigarette. It's dirty and harmful. The reasons behind the cheating don't really matter. Excuses like, he didn't love me enough, or he wasn't satisfying me, don't change the fact that a choice was made. If you're unhappy in your marriage, the solution is simple: get a divorce. But many women would rather stay married than chase fleeting, meaningless flings. A woman who cheats often gets caught in the excitement of infatuation, mistaking it for love. She may abandon her children and long-term marriage, especially if her lover is younger, and in the end, it all falls apart. Eventually, the lover fades away, and reality hits hard. The woman is left to pick up the pieces and might try to return to her ex-husband or use her children to manipulate the situation. The damage is done, and there's no going back. My mother left my father and me when I was just over 2 years old. My dad never remarried and dedicated all his love to raising me. Every summer, I would stay with my Aunt Isa at her cottage, spending time with her children, Arya and Charles. When I turned 17, my father passed away unexpectedly, leaving me all alone. After high school, I joined the military, enrolling in artillery college. I had no interest in where my mother was or what she was doing. I knew she wasn't in my life, and I felt nothing for her. One day, I found her picture in an album, but my father quickly took it away, leaving nothing in the house to remind me of her. After graduating, I served in the military for some time before being sent as an instructor to an African country. I was tasked with training their artillery troops. I worked with a mortar battery and had an interpreter since I didn't speak the local language. I was there for about 1.5 years before I made the mistake of drinking contaminated water from local sources during an exercise. I contracted hepatitis and was sent home for treatment. I spent 2 months in the hospital and, during that time, met a charming nurse named Camila. We quickly developed an affair. I had no experience with women, and it seemed as though the universe was conspired for us. By the time I was discharged, we were married, and soon after, our son Dylan was born. I wanted more children, but Camila was adamantly against it. She said she was still young and wanted to live for herself. That should have been my first warning, but I brushed it off. My military service took me on long trips to conflict zones, and I spent less and less time with my family. In the Army, no one cares about your personal life. It's all about the job. I missed my son and wife when I was away, and when I was home, I tried to spend as much time with them as I could. However, over time, I felt as though Camila was becoming increasingly distant, and my son was also pulling away from me. One day, I was sent abroad for a business trip that I thought would last a month, but it ended up being nearly half a year. I tried to reach my family multiple times, but Camila only replied once. Her letter was filled with empty phrases, and it seemed more out of duty than genuine affection. I received no more letters from her. Eventually, my trip came to an end, and I returned home. I handed in my documents at the unit headquarters and rushed to see my family. But when I arrived, Camila wasn't there, and Dylan was playing outside under the supervision of a neighbor. The neighbor looked confused when she saw me and mentioned that Camila had gone to the store, asking her to look after Dylan. Something didn't feel right. I took Dylan's hand, and we walked home. On the way, Dylan excitedly talked about his kindergarten and his friends there. Then he casually said, "Dad, I'm not your dad. Uncle Oliver is my dad, and Mom says you're leaving." I was shocked, but I kept calm. We continued home, and when we arrived, I gave Dylan the gifts I had brought for him. I went to the bathroom to collect my thoughts, and while I was there, I heard the front door slam. Camila must have come inside. I took my time before going out. Camila was busy in the kitchen, pretending to be cheerful. She tried to kiss my cheek, but I pulled away. "Let's talk," I said. Camila sensed the tension and slowly sank onto a stool, her face filled with concern. "How long have you been seeing Oliver? When are you leaving?" I asked, my voice cold. Camila stammered, trying to avoid eye contact. "What do you mean?" she asked, looking confused. "I know everything," I said flatly. "You've been seeing him for almost a year. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made your choice." Camila started crying, begging me to listen, but I was done. "I'll file for divorce. I'll visit Dylan when I can, but I'm done. Find yourself another place to live." I grabbed my duffel bag, threw it over my shoulder, and walked toward the door. Camila cried out, asking if I was even going to ask who he was, but I didn't care. I opened the door without another word, feeling no anger, just a cold emptiness. It was all over. I walked out of the apartment and stood for a moment in the hallway, the weight of the situation settling in. I wasn't angry, nor was I sad. I felt a strange emptiness, like I had been watching the whole thing unfold from a distance, like it wasn't even happening to me. Camila's betrayal had already been sealed in my mind, and there was nothing she could say or do to undo the damage. The streets outside were cold and quiet, but I didn't notice. My mind was elsewhere, focused on the steps I had to take next. I needed to prepare for the divorce, figure out how I was going to manage with Dylan, and try to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The life I had built with Camila, the hopes I had for our family, had crumbled in an instant. But even as I stood there, processing everything, there was a part of me that knew I would get through it. I had lost my father, the person who meant the most to me, and somehow I had survived. I would survive this too. I thought about Dylan, the way he looked at me when he called Oliver his dad. The innocent confusion in his eyes made my heart ache. I couldn't believe what Camila had done, not just to me, but to him. She had betrayed the trust of our son, too. I couldn't let her destroy the bond one had with him. I was determined to be there for Dylan no matter what, to make sure he knew he was loved, and that his father would always be there for him. As I walked away from the building, I thought of the road ahead. Divorce wasn't just paperwork. It was a long, painful process that would affect more than just Camila and me. Dylan would be caught in the middle, and that was something I could never accept. I had to protect him from the fallout, even if it meant cutting ties with Camila completely. I headed for my car, my thoughts a mixture of anger, sadness, and resolve. The hurt was there, lurking beneath the surface, but I wasn't going to let it define me. I wouldn't allow Camila's choices to ruin my future. I started the engine and drove off into the night, my mind already focused on the next steps. There would be no going back to what we had, but there was still the future ahead of me, one that I would build for myself and for Dylan. The past was gone, but my determination to move forward had just begun.